What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and welcome to another random rambling where we pontificate about the problems that people have. Actually, we're going to talk about games. It's just going to be a random jab where we're going to sit down and just yak. I'm going to answer the questions that I put up on Patron. I got a ton of different questions from people, so I'm just going to go through them, and I'm going to start answering them as well as I personally can. Once again, I want to thank all the patrons for actually putting these questions in there. It actually does matter. I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to, I've even got emails about this. I don't really want to ask a question because I don't want to appear stupid, or maybe you've already answered this. And I'll say if I already answered it, but I'll try to give some kind of answer. There's very few times where I won't reiterate something. It just depends on the timeline. Usually that's more in the international podcasts. So it's something you shouldn't worry about. I want to say thanks to everybody who is brand new YouTube sponsor through the YouTube system for subscribing, which is basically just a copy of the Twitch's version of subscribing that YouTube should have probably had since day one. I want to thank all the patrons as well. So let's jump into it. Sergio, I believe I'm pronouncing his name right, and I've had to pronounce it multiple times, and so I apologize, but I think it's like Roulez. I apologize. You can fix it, or you can just ignore it and understand that I'm an idiot. Bethesda's unannounced release. What do you think it is? So, you know, we're getting a ton of remakes from them. We're getting a ton of games out on the Switch. And it looks like, at least from the people I've talked to, that Doom on the Switch is actually pretty enjoyable, even though, you know, it's locked at 30 and so forth. It's nice to see these games get on there. I know a lot of people immediately see a Doom, let's say, and they look at the Switch and they're like, okay, that's stupid. It shouldn't be on there. I'm not of the same belief. It should be on there. Those kind of things can be good experiences. They won't be the equivalent of a PC experience with SLI or whatever you may have. That makes sense. But we all also don't drive Lamborghinis. It doesn't stop us from enjoying whatever Sonata or Genesis you may have, or hey, a bicycle. So in the end, I don't really look down on any of that. But I do want to say that we're getting a lot of these being announced by Bethesda, and especially with their event, Evil Within 2, which is the footage I got for the Walking the Walk. There was some event footage from that. My personal belief is it isn't anything big. I think they pretty much announced most of their stuff. It's probably another remake. And in fact, I think maybe they just considered what they just talked about, you know, with Doom and stuff as this actual game. So we'll have to see if it's really actually going to be anything. If your real question is, Karak, is the Bethesda game Starfield? I would say probably not, because the changes in Bethesda's ideals towards releasing PR data later versus earlier, it came at a time that if it was going to be Starfield, that information would have been out. It's just the wrong timing. So yeah. And then next up, Anthony Acello, when playing an RPG game, what's something that just breaks immersion for you? Bonus question: what's your favorite RPG combat system? Something that breaks immersion for me, I have discussed this on a podcast, but I'll discuss it now. I've discussed it in Walking the Walks for sure. It's not necessarily just map mess. Map mess, of course, is when you hit that map button and you see 800 icons. It's actually a lot of times when a game goes out of its way to describe something and then inherently breaks it at the very next moment. For example, Horizon Zero Dawn, which I liked a lot, was, I mean, the entire entire narrative drive behind the game, the actual spirit of the game was about ostracization, was about native rituals in this location, was about their spiritual beliefs, was about their religions, was about knowing the land and the area, and then you become the character and you don't know where most of the stuff is, which just fucking makes no sense. It happens in Assassin's Creed. It happens in a lot of games. Games like where everybody can steal stuff, or maybe there's thieves and you're the only thief who can see the giant glowing box with 500 gold pieces in it or whatever. That kind of stuff just drives me nuts because the narrative doesn't match what the player's experience actually is. And that happens in Skyrim. It happens in almost every RPG where they're like, whoops, you forgot where the fuck everything is. At some point, I would like a game to be where, let's say I decided I wanted to be an explorer. I wanted to be a dude who's pushing the limits. And so when I chose to be an explorer, the game says, okay, you want to be an explorer. Well, everybody already knows where the main cities are and the mini cities are, but you pick one place. And we're just going to fill out the information for you. We're going to tell you where everything is, where like the bad guys roam, where the creatures can be hunted, and sort of attaches the skill or the character class to the game world's creation. Now, I've talked about this with a lot of developers in the podcasts and just randomly, and it's something that is very difficult to do. It's not super easy to do, but I would love to see that actually happen. I would love to see that increase in RPGs. My favorite RPG combat system, you know, I mean, All right, I want to say sorry about that. You'll probably see a momentary pause because I ended up having to pause this so I could go and answer the door. Somebody rang the door despite me actually saying please don't. So the next question was going to be, what's my favorite RPG system? I talked about this in my last video, which is why this might be asked, but it's the same answer, which is I really did enjoy KOTOR as an overall just game development system and character development system, sorry, and jumping in there and the way it handled things and the radius dials at the top above the character just really worked well for me. When it comes to overall, though, I will say that I don't feel any games ever got it right. And I think that that's probably the really the best way to look at it, that every game will have issues that will bother some people and not bother others. And as long as you understand where I'm coming from and why, like, let's say something bothers me, I feel like that's good enough. I can sort of explain it to you, and then you can say, you know what, I get it. I totally understand where you're coming from, and I don't agree, and I'm going to play, which is cool. Next up is Leeson says, life related. You've mentioned before you have a family that's Chinese. Can you speak any of the language? And have you been to China before? I haven't been to China before. I do have on my wife's side Chinese family members, and they can somewhat, but they were I believe, if I remember right, her mom at a very young age came to America. So they did have some of it, but it's one of those things that over time, when you're not surrounded by people speaking that language, you sort of lose some of it. She knows some words, but me, I think there was a couple that I picked up over time, just, trying to find out how I could say it if she wanted to test me, and sort of doing a little bit of a quiz there and trying to get one or two words, but overall, no. The next up is gaming related. Do you think early access can sometimes ruin a game's popularity at launch? Sorry, I'm not laughing at your question. I was thinking DOS 2 or Divinity Original Sin 2 hasn't been talked about much or reviewed much by outlets because it's old news. This is the inherent problem with early access, guys and gals. The issue that occurs, and it's a tremendous problem, is something I've talked about before in other podcasts, where PR for a company, for just the overall chatter that we all see, whether it be movies and so forth. We've had this before where a movie gets delayed or a game gets delayed and the chatter goes down, and it never gets to that fever pitch. You have to hit that bump, right? It's almost like if you ever follow motocross and they talk about, loading up the motorbike before they hit that jump so that they can get even farther. It's really that kind of thing with PR. And early access is like being faster to the jump, but then not hitting it just right. And that doesn't mean every game, but many. Divinity Original Sin's selling really well and it's doing really well, but it's not really being talked about because a lot of people, I think, don't have a lot to talk about it for. They're playing it, they're engaged in it. It also happens to be a long game, and there are other games that are actually coming out where there's some excitement versus, I guess, an expected excellence from a lot of people. And that's okay. It doesn't work for all companies. It doesn't work for all games. Early access, I feel, is very dangerous for some games. It just really depends on how you're going about it. If you have a Kickstarter attached to it, if you don't, your prior past as a company. If you're somebody like Obsidian who's doing Fig for their expansion for Pillars of Eternity 2, you can get away with those. But if you're a different company, you may not be able to. And I would like to see a little less early access, but I would like to see a little more demos and betas. I think that the more we can do that, the better. I think early access makes sense for developers because they're like, hey, things it's more expensive for this, or it's less expensive for that, or, we can get the engine, so that's cheaper, but we want our own textures. We don't want to buy from the Unity store, so we want to make our own stuff. So that's going to cost more than this would have actually cost to license an engine or whatever. You have this tit for tat. So it can always be good and it can always be bad, which is unfortunate because I don't think a lot of gamers want to really sit down and embrace the fact that it's not black and white. It's not. And early access is one of those things where it's not necessarily good or bad, but it can affect everybody so differently, right? And it's really interesting to me that Divinity Original Sin, same thing. I haven't even got a chance to play it very much. I mean, it's... As a consumer-based channel, trying to get information out there about my experience with the title day one or as soon as possible, especially if they're asking for friggin' cash, it's difficult sometimes to return to something when they're that late. And these guys were really late with their review code. All power to them. They were trying to fix it. And trust me, in the last couple of weeks, you guys have seen some reviews where there's been a lot of bugs in some of these games. So I applaud them for that. But at the same time, yeah, coverage is difficult. Let's see. Mobius says, what's your recipe for pork rind nachos? I don't have a recipe for pork rind nachos. I absolutely, a lot of people ask me about that because they're like, what the hell, pork rind? And I know it sounds gross. It was something that somebody else showed me, you know, especially as somebody who, I'm not a big fan of sugars. And I am more of a fan of, let's say, a lower carbohydrate diet. And when I found pork rinds one day, it just, we used them. I don't know if it was a commercial where they showed the chip breaking in the salsa or whatever, but super hot, spicy pork rinds you can buy. And I know a lot of people like pork rinds. And one day we were like, well, what if you just made nacho stuff on the side and you dipped your pork rind in there? And I did. And I was like, holy shit, this is good. And it works and it doesn't break. And from that point on, it became the thing. And even my friends will come over and be like, and I mean, my best friends, family members have been all, that looks and sounds revolting. And then they try it. And I'm like, will you try it? Almost everybody says, yeah, okay, I'll try it. You know, I mean, most people, even more so than me, will try something different like that. And every single one of them, there's been zero. Every single one of them has been like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they've all switched over to liking that. So, but if you hear pork rind nachos and right now you're going, that's probably why. And I'm sure I've answered some of these. These questions have come up multiple times. So I apologize if there's any repeats, because when I did my random rambling, some of these were already in the list and were probably already running around in my mind. The Zombie Cooper says, gaming related, do you think that the way the gaming industry is now with microtransactions, overtly high expectations, poor handling, disregard for customer gamer, and so on, would you see the game industry crash in the near future, or would the indie industry take over? So I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that the indie industry is any better than the AAA, nor are they different. This is something I've talked about many times. It's not like you're holding them up like, a baby in Lion King, where you're like, Hunga Kenya, or whatever the fuck they sing. I don't believe that. I don't believe they're better or worse. I believe that they're different. And it's like first, second, or third party games are, in the end, to the consumer, a game. And then you have to judge them for their gaminess, I guess. So when it comes down to this, I think that there's cynicism on the gamer side that is both real and not. And I think I think we can all agree that that kind of stuff happens in any industry, but I think video games are even higher for various different reasons. It's also an industry that is old now, technically. I mean, Atari was 1974, 6, something like that. But it's also has a very high technology turnover rate, like new thing. When you look at it, let's say, let's look at just music, just for a general example. But you go from your vinyl to your tape, right? To your CD, to, MP3 players, which sometimes, have horrible bit rate depending on how you use an MP3. You know what I mean? So there's just a couple technology changes there. But here with video games, there's been a ton. It's like every generation there's something dramatically different, even just moving from, let's say, pixels to polygons. So it's interesting. I don't think there'll be a crash. I think that one will just sort of leak over onto the other. I do also believe that it's a worldwide industry now. And just because, let's say if America stopped buying games, then other people in other nations may not be burned by the same things. They may not even get those games that are causing gamers in America to have problems, and they'll still end up wanting to play them. There's the indie market, of course, but there's also mobile, which is a platform versus sort of this nebulous thing. Because I'm going to be honest, if you look at most people's resumes who are indie after a while or are AAA, they've switched multiple times. I mean, Double Fine is a good example of a company that's gone, many of them do that. I don't know what is, but I'm going to end up patenting that. That'll be my new thing. Buy, wait for a sale, rent, or... And next up, Sophia Norwich says, what are 5 books all people should read, 5 movies you think all people should watch, and 5 games you think all people should play? 5 books. Waylander by David Gemmell, probably one of the best fantasy writers ever. Terry Brooks, Elfstones of Shannara, fantastic book. TV shows based on it. Just a really good overall title. Altered Carbon by Morgan, great sci-fi title. Krauss wrote the best story ever told yet, which is a Quantum Dynamics book. Very well done. A little deep for some people, and I don't mean deep in a way that is rude to other people. I mean, he does try to be layman, but the dude's thinking at a level where even his basic terms can be above a lot of people. And so, for example, myself, there were times where I'd be like, pause, because it was an audiobook at that time. I was like, pause, go listen, or listen to him, go look online, find out what he's talking about, because sometimes he would just be like, blah, 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 and to get to his point, he passed 3 things you'd need to know. Those are really good. I think that's only 4. You know, a 5th one I would say is The Dark Half by Stephen King, sorry, that I mentioned, was that 2 days ago or a day ago? It is just a really, really well done book. One of those ones that I think it's not only just really well written, but it's got a lot of bits of Stephen King in it for some reason. And the idea of, you know, killing off the pseudonym and all that stuff. It's just very well done. Storm of the Century was a good TV show and good movie as well. Let's see, that was books. 5 movies. Way of the Gun. Phenomenal movie. Way of the Gun. Legend with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry. That's 1980s movie. Willow. I'm a big fantasy fan. Hawk the Slayer. Worst movie you've ever seen. Hawk the Slayer. You guys got to see that. I love The Rock with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery. I think that's a fantastic, over-the-top movie. Before Michael Bay had Michael Bay'd everything, it was more of a surprise than anything, and I really felt that movie was fantastically done. The Game with Michael Douglas, Sean Penn, just from start to finish, man. Isabella Rossellini, I think, is his wife in that. Just, man, start to finish, that is such a good movie, and was one of the few that right up until the end I was like, wait, what? What's happening? I don't know if that's 5, but that's what you're getting for now. 5 games you think all people should play. Pong. And I'm not at all joking about that. I think that a binary game like Pong, where you have one specific goal and it's just left, right, pure table tennis style. I think that when you have a basic and you have a very advanced title in your brain, you can quite easily draw parallels between them all and sort of match them all. I mean, I've even had people who have listened to my reviews be like, dude, I haven't played like 85 of these games. And so you're sort of trying to make sure that you can explain it well to somebody. And I think if more people had played the ancient games and understood where just the way the industry was created, where its genesis was, it might be a little bit easier for people to understand why maybe some people make those kind of games, and even now, you know, make those older style of games, because some people just get mad. They're like, this game doesn't have much going on. It's like, well, you know what? There's a large contingent of people, new and old, who may like that. And the fact is, you need to remove your ego from it and remember that just because a game gets released you don't like, it doesn't negatively impact anything else. You're still going to get whatever game you are looking at over here. In fact, really all you've done is wasted your calories that you probably imbibed with your pork rind nachos. So let's see, 4 games total. Boy, Bard's Tale, Thief of Fate, Apple IIe, one of my favorite games of all time. Really brought in the first person 3D maze kind of stuff. I was a big fan of Phantasy Star as well, but I think it's Bard's Tale 3 Bard's Tale 3. Oh, I can't remember the subtitle. Really well done game. I love the Bard's Tale games. I loved their town that you started in, and it was just really impressive to me from start to finish. Another game that I think, and people are going to be like, why is he saying this? Because this is not a best of games. This is just games I think people should play. Medal of Honor Airborne. Medal of Honor Airborne has so many things that are ahead of its time that some of them still haven't really been replicated. One of which is where when you die, you don't respawn down on the ground with everybody else, like, and so people get, you spawn in airplanes that are supposedly dropping troopers in World War II. Holy shit, did that work well. It just made you, and you could change, we tested this, you could change like where the battles would happen because these maps were massive, and so you could end up in your little, you know, parachute deciding which side of the battle you wanted to go to, and you would think, okay, I'll get behind the people by going over here. You would go over there and there'd be a wholly different battle situation there that was just as tough and just as nail-biting. It was fantastic. It was incredible. It was one of those titles that even now, it just became backwards compatible a while ago, and it was one of the first games where I was like, boom, get it. And speaking of backwards compatible, that would be my other game. You know, Alan Wake is one that I mentioned a couple days ago, but I certainly would say a Virtual Fighter or an older style Polygon slowed down fighting game where it's more about technique and looking for openings in a more realistic looking environment, even though, let's be honest, Lao was jumping like 18 feet in the air. So that's a character in the game. So I would like people to play those. I think that's probably, again, only 4, and I apologize, but that's some good ideas. Let's see. Primordial Entropy says, what's the worst experience you've had from playing a buggy game? I'm going to tell you that I can remember, right? That I can remember. Well, Pool of Radiance, the remake, deleted your C drive when you tried to uninstall it. They were like, fuck you, you can't get rid of us. We're deleting your C drive. That was pretty shitty, pretty insane. But because it was just one experience, and a big one, it wasn't the one I remembered. The one I remember is Alekine's Gun, which I only reviewed less than a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And Alekine's Gun it's a buggy mess. Its sounds are terrible. Terrible. A lot of people will say, why do you review sound, music, and voice? They're always good. And I'm like, well, first of all, they're not. I mean, there's been many games where I mentioned that they're not. I think a lot of people assume just because I say something's average, it's immediately awesome. It's not. But it just had actual tonal errors in it where you could hear, let's say, somebody recording this way where they're like, sup, everybody, this is Karak with ACG, or sup, everybody, this is Karak with ACG. And you'd be like, they'd be over here talking. They'd be all, I'm going to kill you, or whatever. And you're all, he's not even talking into the mic. What's happening? And you could hear where they were recording. You could actually hear the tonal resonance of the locations. And there wasn't even a studio kind of environment for them. Now, that could be a money thing, whatever, but this was the question I was asked, so not to delve too deeply into it. I would say that Battle for the Sun is a terrible game, but it's not as buggy really compared to Alekine's Gun, which was just a friggin', it was just infected with issues. Let's see. Jenny C435 says, we all know 70s and 80s John Carpenter movies rule. Yes, we do. We absolutely do. Anybody who disagrees, turn it off now. Just joking. But if you had to pick a favorite he directed in the 90s, which would you choose and why? Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness, I'm almost sure was 90s, and I apologize. It may not be, actually. God damn it. Now that no, wait a minute. I remember the night I watched that with a friend, scared out of my gourd. I will guess that. It could be 89, but I would assume that's a 90s. Prince of Darkness, Alice Cooper kills somebody by stabbing them with a bike. That's how you know it's a good movie. But basically the bike was like broken in half and he stabbed him with the sharp end, whatever sharp piece of metal that was jagged out. Movie was just scary as hell for me as a young kid. Now I think we all watch movies and we're all, yeah, stabbed him with a bike. That's, yeah. I mean, that happens every day, like twice a day, just down the street. So it's not as frightening. But Alice Cooper is crazy in it. They chose a lot of the actors from Big Trouble in Little China. Just a fantastic time, a really enjoyable movie. And now, if I were to watch it, I would think along the lines of, this is almost, and this is why I like John Carpenter and why I tell people that if you like role-playing games, if you like those kind of titles, you should check out his movies, because many of them aren't necessarily as scary as they are about a group seeing a very unique and trying to live through a very unique thing. And what happens is they feel like D&D games to me. And I've described this a lot in other podcasts, but there's a feeling sometimes of watching his movies and going like, yeah, we're going to get the guns. Big Trouble in Little China, sure. But even The Fog, where it was more like maybe a paranormal Call of Cthulhu style title, where you watch this and you're like, this is there's detective work. There's things in his older movies that don't necessarily exist in horror movies anymore. There's no real detective work anymore. There's no real thought process. It's just like boom, boom, boom. Bad guy shows up, so you don't have to figure out what the bad guy is. Or if you do, it's a 360 camera pan as a person reads an ancient Bible that has a word replaced or whatever. And you're like, now I know. The clown is from this or whatever. You know, it's not as in depth, and it doesn't require as much from the watcher. So Julian de la House. I'm fucking these up. Sorry. Hello. You're well known for your love of cheese balls. Do you have a favorite brand, or do you not discriminate between cheese balls? You're granted the choice of unlimited supply of cheese balls or Monster. Which do you choose? Okay, first of all, it'd be Monster, without a doubt. Cheese balls, funny enough, I do like somewhat, but it became a joke amongst the patrons. The first patrons who really, we all sat down. We were like, this is something I want to do with the channel. Let's move forward sort of as a team, as, you know, a base patron group plus myself. The cheese balls became this just hilarious, goofy picture I sent where I was eating cheese balls and somehow had not hit my mouth a couple times, and there was shit and, you know, cheese ball powder in my beard. And I sent this picture to a bunch of patrons as a joke, and it became an emoji and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not a big fan of it. I am a big fan of energy drinks. I always have been since, you know, well, pretty much they first probably came out. So I would say definitely Monster. I mean, and that shit's expensive. Cheese balls, you can get like 5 fucking pounds for $3.99 or something, where a Monster's like $3.99 for 5 ounces and shit. It's super expensive. Troy McKinnon says, do you think the upcoming Borderlands project can help Gearbox reverse their PR slide after the shitstorm of the Aliens release? Unsuccessful releases of Duke Nukem and Battleborn, the price hike of We Happy Few, though they deny involvement, and the general sleaziness of Redacted. That's a person's name. I don't even want to say that person's name because then I'll just get pissed. Do you think the upcoming Borderlands project can help? Yes. I think that any game can help. I do want to say this, though. Any game can hurt, too. And I know where you're coming from, but I want to say the world, games, any industry, you have to really separate from this industry. You have to take a step back and you have to look at the world and the industries that exist within it that aren't just games. We have seen notoriously successful companies die from multiple bad decisions. We have seen notoriously bad companies rise from the ashes with excellent leadership and excellent decisions. We see it all the time. We choose to remember the worst because that is loss, and humans remember loss. This is scientifically proven. They remember loss better than they remember gains and benefits. It's actually just easier to sort of track loss than it is, you know, a bonus or something like that, because I think it focuses your attention on whatever's happening versus, oh, you know, I got more of this, okay, versus, oh, I'm almost out, right? Well, that happens with game releases as well. And I think that while I would love to see, you guys know I'm not as big of a fan of Borderlands as a lot of people are, not even near as big of a fan. It didn't really light my fire, like let's say Maddie or Lone, or I think Silver and Reg both have played that and liked it. But I personally hope that it does well. I don't think they're in too bad of a spot. You know, they released, or somebody released the world's worst headline on an online magazine. I can't remember what it was, but they're like, Battleborn turns off, and so it's not turning off. It's just they're not updated anymore, but they will continue to have the servers running. Now, we all know that at some point they'll have to stop because it costs them money. A lot of us like to pretend that every company, once you release a game, you sell one game, you should be backing that fucking game up for the rest of your life. It doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. And I think that it's actually better to understand that. Some people might be like, well, that's being soft on them. They should run it forever, whatever. I actually think it actually makes more sense for both consumers and gamers, or consumers and game creators to move forward after an unallotted period of time and go, okay, what is next? What things can we integrate into this? And I certainly wouldn't want to be playing Duke Nukem 3D on my Sega Saturn still and be considering that the pinnacle of first-person shooting, even though it wasn't at the time, but I really liked it. So I think it's okay. I think, you know, they've had some successes and failures, and let's hope they learn from it, right? Gave Derby says, hi Karak, I was wondering if there's a set night and time you do B-movie night for the patrons. I'd like to get involved, but I'm in the UK, so it might be quite difficult for me to tune in. Also, I'd love for you to review and do a walk in the walk on Bloodborne. How come you never reviewed it? It feels like a glaring omittance in your portfolio. Yeah, this is something I've described multiple times. Well, especially with Battleborn, because it had that weird memory issue where all the fucking main bosses turned stupid if you left it on, which I did. So there was that. But I'm just one person, man. I mean, I'm just one person. In all honesty, I would say, without exaggeration, removing the weird questions and so forth, I probably get 200 to 300 emails now, maybe 150 to 200 emails now, a day. Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm including DMs and messages from Patron and so forth about games I haven't reviewed. And I'm just like, I love that people want me to cover those, but you must remember, in the end, I am a consumer-based channel, so I'm trying to do those reviews of titles that, you know, are coming out that people need to know. They're getting ready, because at this current juncture, this is the way it's, this is the way it's done, where people release the games for $60 and they want your money right away. Hey, if they allowed you to just basically play it for 6 hours and then say, you know what, I do want it or I don't, that would be a different thing. But I just don't have time to return back to old games. I'm going to do a classic review section for the patrons. That's one of the rewards, but it'll be classic games, like old games. Not Bloodborne is nowhere near old enough to be included in that list. And I'm sorry that I can't get all of them, but I can't. I mean, there's just literally not enough time to get even a tenth of the games that people get mad at me about. And I've had people unsubscribe, multiple people say, You're not going to review Bloodborne. I'll be like, I'm in the middle of reviewing, you know, this, I mean, whatever it may be, you know, some big game right now. And, you know, Forza or something. They'll be all, well, then I'm just going to unsubscribe. Okay. I mean, I don't quite get it. I don't quite get what you're expecting, especially when that person might have a week ago said, you do a lot of games. This is awesome. And then they turn around and go, you do a lot of games, but you didn't do the one I want. This sucks. Whatever. You can't win them all. Let's see. When I do the B movie night, it is not static on purpose. We have a lot of people like yourself who have different time frames for when they can do the B movies. I do 2, even though I've only promised in the Patron to do 1. I do 2 a month, actually. And the reason why is because we have had issues where people really want to go. They really want to. And I'm telling you right now, yesterday's Turbo Kid. If you get a chance, go to Internet Movie Database and look up Turbo Kid, because holy shit, that game. And that's one of those titles where, you know, when you're watching it, you're just like, this has got to be a B movie, and you find out that no, it's not. It's actually 2015, and they attempted to fake a B movie, and man, they nailed it. So we just got to see that. Unfortunately, as of right now, there's only so much Karak I can spread around on the sandwich of desire that every patron and subscriber wants. I certainly would love to do more, but right now 2 is the most, and I do try to do one in the earlier day and one in the late night or later night, and that usually can hit some people, but it also depends on school and people going to work and so forth. Let's see. Edmund Jensen says, favorite action RPG character build? I've always been partial to spell swords. I've always been I don't even call them spell swords because, you know, I'm old school, but in old fantasy novels and so forth, Gord the Rogue, some of those guys were really cool because maybe they had one or two things enchanted or whatever, and you know, it wasn't just crazy. I like those kind of things. So as long as it's not too powerful on the magic side, I'm definitely a fan of those kind of titles or those kind of character builds. It's really honestly up to the game too, because for example, Dragon's Dogma, I played a Mystic Knight, which I believe is the advanced class of 2 others that mix together, the Knight and probably the Mage. And I really had a fantastic time with that. I think with that I was using, what was I using? I was using a staff and a shield or something. Like, it was a crazy combo that you don't always see. I do like that kind of stuff, unique combos. You guys saw it, if you saw my review and the stream I did of Neo, you know, Kirasagama, the chain and sickle, chain and sickle, whatever you may say. It fantastic fucking weapon, one of my favorite weapons of all time. And if you see a master using that thing, it is basically what appears to be like a person standing inside of an atom. You know, that's what it looks like, just spinning around, and you're like, wow, that's insane. So I like those unique bits. So if a character build has a unique weapon, sometimes I'll pick that as well. Claudio Gomes says, he says Ryu. I don't know what that means. Maybe that's his username. Hey, do you have any tips for a newbie who wants to grab some friends and start playing D&D? Can you explain about role-playing and give a bit of understanding about the game and the character creation behavior that each person needs to create? Yeah. Okay, so do I have any tips for a newbie who wants to grab some friends? Okay, here's the thing. If you have some friends who like role-playing video games, it's a little bit easier. Basically, you sit them down and you say, remember that time in whatever game that you really like where you wanted to do something, but the game only gave you 3 things you could say or 4 things you could say, and you wanted to say a 5th thing? Role-playing allows you to do that. Give them examples of, remember the dungeon you went into and you wanted to retreat, but that wasn't an option. You can retreat in D&D games. Start that way. Start using, that's what I've always done. It's always worked, is giving people parallels. Because I have a lot of friends who never played D&D, but they did Final Fantasy. And you can be like, okay, you know how you have to do this, but this? Now we can. Remember, there are some games where in the middle of a battle, or even not in the middle of a battle, they just didn't have the ability to trade weapon or items between each other. I still remember games where you had to put the item in a fucking chest, and then your other character had to open the chest and grab the item out. Like, your hands couldn't touch. Like Wonder Twin, they were like, no, we don't want people touching each other, but you can put it in the fucking chest, and then the chest can open up and the other person can grab it. It made no sense. So give them the idea of the limitations that are in normal video games and the fact that there are no limitations in role-playing. One of the best parts about role-playing to me, and this is not agreed upon by many, this is simply how I like to role-play, is the fact that social and mental skills can easily be if you have a good DM, can easily be as useful as the ability to kill everybody. That's just Diablo in role-playing form, if that's all you're doing. And some people like that. Some people use miniatures. We don't even use that. We just sit around a table with a piece of paper, playing cards for our dice, and we go for it. So I would start by explaining to them the differences in how role-playing allows you to do that. If you don't have friends nearby, I always tell people there is a website that is actually quite popular. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's all over the world. People get mad at me for this all the time, but I can only speak about here, man. I can't travel to Australia and check this out. So it's called Meetup. It's called Meetup, and there's been a lot of success that I know from people who are patrons, from people who follow me on Twitter, and just general, you'll hear about it on RPG sites where people found a lot of really, really, really spectacular groups. One of the reasons being those groups are rated. And that rating can negatively affect you. People aren't going to want to go if it's like, oh, you know, during a talisman, somebody lost and he threw a fit and you scared everybody or whatever. So they do a very good job of rating people. I would check that site out if you're in a place where there's just nobody there and you really want to play D&D. The next thing, because I don't want to spend too much time, can you explain about role-playing, give a bit of understanding about the game, the character creation? Yeah, sure. It's any world you want to be in, and basically what it does is it allows you to play. If the game has archetypes like a knight or so forth, it allows you to play those and go about, and different rule sets, just like video games have different skills that might go with them. Some games are classless, like myself, where they have no class, like myself. But no, you can just grab any skills from anything as long as you've killed enough people or made enough good decisions. Some games are based more on you can only learn these things from very particular people, so their classes are very rigid and very basic. The thing about role-playing is I absolutely adore it. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great challenge. I also think that it is very hard to get a group of people together to do it. And one of the things that I've learned does work is a lot of times if you have a board game night where people who like board games can come, then you can sometimes mention it. Sometimes with role-playing, you still have to mention a little bit because I'll be brutally honest, a lot of people think of it as theatrics where you're wearing a bunch of, you know, unique fucking helms and shit while you're sitting around a table. All I know is that's never happened with us, but it's possible. It would be best, you know, if you want to broach it to somebody that you're already there talking. You don't just say, hey, I'm scheduling a meeting with you in Gmail. We're going to discuss D&D. There's a good chance that person will be all, no, I'm not coming. So, you know, hang out with your friends, show them what it's like. You can show them Critical Role that is on YouTube. From what I remember, they don't really use miniatures there either. It's just the DM and some voice actors. And I'm going to be honest, they actually cut up and joke and stuff far more than any group I know in real life, but I think it's to be entertaining for, you know, the people who are watching. Where you're playing a lot of times, it can be very intense in a good way and very detailed. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. Tom Leslie says, what are your thoughts on the original Beyond Good and Evil? Thoughts on the new one? I've always massively been in love with the first one, and the new one seems like a blast, but for different reasons. I think I just love sticking it to the man. Okay, so I don't know what sticking it to the man is, but I will say maybe that was a one-liner in the game, or maybe that's a Ubisoft joke. But plain and simple fact is, Beyond Good and Evil is fantastic. It's one of those games that took me 2 or 3 times to get into. It had some control issues. I wasn't a fan of the camera system. The camera system in that game was not really very good. It's like, you need to take pictures of these fucking seagulls. And they'd be in this area where you had to crane over and like saddle sideways just enough and then bend down and then turn and hope it was Sunday. And if all those things matched up, you hit fucking take a picture and boom, you get a picture of the seagulls and you get like 5 experience points or whatever they gave you. I think they gave you orbs in that game. I love it. I love the combat. There was a boss that I hated. It's the boss with the cage for a head. Man, it went the difficulty bump for some reason. You know, sometimes that everybody's good at a game and then we all have that one character that just, it doesn't attune to us and we can't figure out why, but they beat us. A lot of times you go to sleep, you wake up and you're just like morning fresh and you beat it and you win right away. That's pretty much happened with Beyond Good and Evil for me with that character. It is a unique world. It's a world with an incredible amount of depth going on, regardless if you actually even just experience it in the game. And I cannot wait for the sequel. I'm super stoked for that. In fact, I rarely get stoked for games. I talk about it a lot where I don't like to, because if I get stoked for a game, then a lot of times that'll just let us all down kind of thing. You know, I think we should all be that way, where it's more like when it's out, you take a gander at it and you decide to get it versus just the hype. I'm not a big fan of hype. That's one of the few games where I have to sort of step away and not read too much about it, because I'm so excited for it. But also at the same time, I don't want to do that because I don't want to get set up and think, oh man, this is going to be amazing. And they've made concessions for today's type of gamers and today's type of game systems, and it's maybe not exactly my speed. So it'll be interesting to see. Let's see. The next one is Thaddeus Fabdul says, hey, Karak, what's your favorite game you've played this year? And what did you love most about it? What's your favorite game you played this year? What's your favorite game you played this year? Shit. I just, unfortunately, I replayed Oxenfree. And now that's in my head is like, oh, it's Oxenfree for sure, but that's not really this game. Man, I would be hard pressed. I would have to go look through my reviews. Nothing's standing out, but that's not because they're bad. It's because I've actually liked a lot of games, and I've been really impressed with like Observer, let's say, and the uniqueness there. It wasn't the greatest game in the world, but impressed for different reasons. And you know, I'll say this. I don't know my favorite game, but I will say that Injustice 2, I don't even need to look. 2 games. Injustice 2, I think, handles microtransactions as close to as good as you can handle it, and is also just a blast and has great graphics and is just really fun for me personally to play. I have a great time with that game. And it's a game that keeps on giving because of the multiple world, multiple dimension system, where I always feel, sorry about that, I always feel like there's something new to experience. The next one is actually Bridge Crew from Ubisoft, Star Trek Bridge Crew. And the reason why is because I've felt that VR was really let down by the companies, these hardware companies that created them, including Sony, guys. I'm sorry, because Resident Evil's on this list. It's a great game, but it's one of very few. And Star Trek, there's a feeling about it, a feeling of camaraderie when you play, just a super high level of enjoyment, and it's fun. It's fun, and it's not necessarily as in-depth or detailed as it would be if you were not playing a VR game, but it's as close as I think we've come to really going, okay, I get what you can do with VR, and man, is it a blast. I mean, some of the videos I've shown you guys with Reg and myself and Takedown and a couple others, holy crap, was that fun. It was hilarious and a really, really good time. And that's what matters. You know, a lot of times somebody will say, well, you didn't like this about a game, you didn't like this, but you said it was a wait for a sale versus a never touch or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, a lot of times you got to look at fun factor, because if something's just really, really fun, is that not really what a game's about? We can all argue about the internal politics and stuff, and we can all pretend like all that kind of stuff matters when it comes to the end product. But when it comes to the end product, especially me, who I'm reviewing it not only for people who maybe know the product, but also people who might have just got their first PS4 yesterday, there's a time where you just sort of sit back and go, is it fun? I mean, is it fun? And if it is, okay, you know, and move on. And Bridge Crew is definitely, at least for me, that. Let's see. Anderson Larson says, please tell us more about the fitness side of you, martial arts gym. Not much, man. I mean, I just try to work out every day. I think that one of the things that comes up, you know, it's a sedentary job. I've had sedentary jobs and also very, 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 very physical jobs. So it's never really been something that I've stopped when I went to the other kind of job, unless I was just too tired and wasn't able to physically work out. I like working out. I like boxing and boxing bags. I have a garage, not a gym, but I have a garage and a couple boxing bags there, some sandbags, some different stuff, and ropes, different things. And I like to work out as much as I can. And I like to shift around. So sometimes I'll run for a year, and then I'll switch out and I'll be like, okay, now I'm going to lift, or now I'm going to just concentrate. I'm always concentrating on martial arts boxing. I always like to do that, but really concentrate on it for whatever reason. And I'll just start doing that. It really does depend. But I've always believed that it's best to probably be a little bit physical as well. It burns off some of that stress. And I think it does free the mind a little bit. And I can tell when I don't read or when I don't work out, because things just, they start, I don't know if I would say they matter more, but I'm like, why is this in my brain? This data is useless. It doesn't even need to be here, and I can't figure out why. And a lot of times it's because I haven't burned it out. I haven't just went out and, you know, roughed something up, punched the hell out of something, or run for a while, to where my brain sort of has to go, okay, some shit's got to jettison here because we're working really hard and we don't have time to think about it. I think that's really a positive thing for people, and I would like to see more people do it. Love says, how do you handle negativity? It doesn't, I mean, a little bit of it bothers me, but negativity is just one of those things. Negativity is, it's sort of a vibe, but it's certainly nothing that's realistic, like cancer, which I've gone through, or like illnesses that family members that we all have, or friends that we all have that go through, or horrible situations, that real situations that people go through. So when it comes to video games, I'm just like, listen, you know, like I'll say it before, I'll be like, you can panic all you want and get pissed because I disliked a game you liked or liked a game you disliked. But it's, I mean, I just put my head down and I do another review. And the great thing that I've always felt is that I have, even amongst other, like the developers, even amongst gamers, amongst different people, hearing somebody say, you know, you didn't like our game, or you didn't like this game, but I see where you're coming from. That really matters. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. Diluvian, which, wow, I was not a fan of when that first came out. There were a lot of problems. And the first friggin' post was from their head developer, who said, never, ever change. This is, thank you very much. And I did, I mean, I was like, And they worked on it, and they worked on it, and they didn't show their ass. They didn't, you know, make up any lies. They were just like, okay, and it doesn't mean that what I said was all right, because that's stupid. If you have anybody trying to tell you that they're all right and everybody else is all wrong, that's some mental illness going on there. I will never say that, but I'll certainly say that my reflection of what I experience is pretty much what I say, because I don't have to worry. I just hit record and start talking. So it's a little easier in that element. But the negativity that goes out, and the way it goes out, it's pretty easy to shirk off, because it really doesn't matter that much. It really doesn't. You know, I've had people contact me on, you know, whether it be YouTube or whether it be Twitch or whether it be Patron, and they're like, hey man, and in fact, I've said this a couple times, but the one person was like, I'm dealing with a really bad time, and one of my favorite things to do was to sit back and just listen to your reviews and laugh or whatever. And I'm like, great. And somebody else is like, I don't find you funny. Great. Whatever. I mean, that's life, right? A lot of people seem to think that for some reason what they're saying should matter about your output. And I don't even think that to the reviewer. Like if I say, or to the game. So if I say games, you know, it's amazing, and the reviewer themselves is like, maybe they leave and they were unhappy with development, which has actually happened, and they're like, actually, the game's not worth buying. I'll be like, okay. But for me, it was. Because the moment I listen to you, then you're going to have to listen to me. It doesn't work any other way. And you get a lot of people, whether it be, you know, game makers, game fans, other reviewers, whatever, where that can pop up. And it's something that I think over time you sort of learn, and you're like, oh, all right, I get it. Yeah, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. And in fact, it'll waste all your time if you worry about the negativity. And it'll waste all your time if you're just seeking positivity. For me, I'm just seeking playing a game and telling people what I thought about it. And the great thing is the amazing amount of people who are just like, this is exactly what I experienced. Even if they don't agree with the result, they'll be like, that is exactly what happened. Like, I see exactly where you're coming from. That to me doesn't hit it every time, but that's life. I think, you know, people's fear of failure is one of the major problems. So they try to remove failure by pretending like, you know, you should only do this or you should only do that. It's like, what the fuck ever, man. I mean, people, that's not the way the real world works. And the sooner people understand that that's not the real world, the more we can talk about things with intelligence and the real issues that might be out there and the real problems that might be. So for me, I sort of handle it by laughing at it and just sort of moving on. I mean, it's just one of those situations. It sucks sometimes, but it really is momentary. One of the things I told somebody was dealing with, somebody was attacking them. I can't remember if it was I think it was somebody who wasn't like anybody in the industry, but they were doing videos and they were attacking this reviewer. And no, it's not Mr. Matty. It's somebody else. Because I know he's been attacked for Bethesda stuff, because that's life, right? Whenever you cover just Bethesda, you're going to be attacked. And they were like, man, I'm getting attacked, blah, blah, blah. And I was all, well, you know, it's momentary. I mean, it's momentary. And what's really crazy about the internet, and what's really crazy about everything in games and so forth, is how things can appear focused that aren't. So let me give you an example of that. You can think, oh man, this person's mad about this thing. And you treat it like you would treat it in real life, where you're in a closed room with them. That's not correct. It makes no sense to do so, because that person is mad about something or has done a video, whatever, and you just look at it and you're all, okay, well, guess what? I'm on YouTube, which gets 700 hours of content uploaded every single minute or whatever the fuck it is, then you're just like, well, then that'll go away too. Like, I'll just continue doing my stuff. I'll just do my reviews, or I'll just, say what I want to say about this news about Bethesda, or say whatever I want about 2K, because I've done that kind of stuff. And you just move on. So negativity to me is one of those things that over time just sort of fades on its own. It'll always be replaced by something else, but so too will positivity and really good, fun games. And that's really all that matters to me. Asri Razilla says, do you chat in online games? Do you make new friends in online games? And if so, any tips from any of you would be appreciated. That's a good question. This online thing has become a lot of chaff. It's become very difficult to find out, if I jump into this game, is it going to be terrible? I've been in the Discord and I've seen some people say they've had some really bad experiences online. Luckily, I haven't. The occasional name calling, but Jesus, I deal with that when I walk outside. Like, I mean, you never know what you're going to deal with if you go downtown somewhere or whatever. So, and as a guy, I'm sure it's different for me and much less for me than it would be if I was a girl or something like that. And I get it. I understand. But for me, I find it sad that people have those issues, and I would say your best bet is to go and find forums where maybe they're positive about a game that you want to be positive about. Because if you just want to go and bitch about something, that's not the same thing. If you want to create friends, usually the best way to create friends is to actually go to a place that's filled with a lot of positivity, a game that's doing well, that people enjoy, that you enjoy. Find a forum. That's a good way to do it. There's nothing wrong with finding a place where people are talking negatively, but it'll be difficult a lot of times because everybody's got issues. It'll be more about the fire that burns versus, hey, let's go play a game of Siege or something like that. So it is difficult. I would say, yeah, forums, online Discord, those kind of places. There's a lot of chats that you can find for Discord. It is difficult. I would say keep trucking along. And you'll find them over time. If you're playing, I will say one thing: if you're playing a competitive game, like let's say UFC, Mortal Kombat, or something, your chances are far lower because number one, you might only be placed against each other once or twice, but also it's competitive and you're attacking one another. A lot of times when it comes to Rainbow Six Siege kind of games, those kind where there's multiple people playing, Destiny or Division, they're all D's. Weird. You can usually find a website that has forums and or clubs you can join. And that would be probably one of your first and best places to start. So anyway, that's it for the questions. Holy shit, that was a lot. Now, I'm sure I've repeated a little bit from the rambling one because I saw one or two questions and they sort of caused me to think about things when I was doing the rambling one. So I apologize if there was some repeat there. But I would say, yeah, it's been awesome, man, these last couple weeks have been so great to actually be able to, for example, people don't realize it, the patrons and the positivity and stuff really allowed me to do the preview video for the Walking the Walk, the mini Walking the Walk for Evil Within 2, because it allowed me to sort of step away and be like, okay, I have this moment where they've asked me if I want to cover this, and I'm able to say negative stuff, which is rare, not rare, but it doesn't happen as much. But you can say what you want about this thing. And I said, I would like to do a Walking the Walk, which is where most of the time it's just like how I feel, but since somebody else is playing it, I may notice some things. Is this okay? And they're like, absolutely. It allowed me to do it without going, man, maybe I should just do another review, or something like that. It didn't happen a ton, but it certainly did happen at times. And that ability to sit back and say, there's some content that people who like reviews would like as sort of side content. Patron has allowed it to happen. YouTube subscriptions has really allowed it to happen. I've had a good number of people subscribe, and that helps a ton. Yes, a lot of people ask me, they're like, "Does YouTube take fees?" Yeah, so does Patron, and Patron takes fees and doesn't even do taxes, which is, depending on where you are, 40 to 50%. Well, yeah, depending on where you are, it's pretty crazy. So they all take something. They all take their snippet, and we can rally against it, and I get that. And if that's your choice, feel free. Or we can just say that is, as they say, a part of doing business, and you want to support whatever creators out there. Maddie's got his Patron going, and the dude has got some crazy good stuff on there. Crazy good stuff. He covers things in a way where he can still talk about stuff in a critique, but it's just a lot of positivity and a lot of people talking about these things. And even if you're positive about the critique, where you're like, yeah, I did notice that. Maybe sort of like the walking the walks, maybe they should do this. And there's that interesting discussion. And to me, that's far more important than, you know, all the negativity that goes on and stuff like that. And that's how you support people like Maddie. That's how you support folks. Amazon affiliate links. It's funny. They don't work very often. I rarely get nothing from them, but occasionally somebody will be like, I'm upgrading my computer. I'm going to use your Amazon affiliate links just generally. And some of that stuff may hit you. And it actually helps. It allows for me to get one more game for a review. I haven't tracked this perfectly, but I would love to track it. It's a lot, but I would like to track how just every single game that was sort of, it's hard to track this because your money goes in a pool and it doesn't have a name of a game on it, but it would be nice to go, this is how many games would never have been done regardless, due to Amazon affiliates, due to, you know, and break those up. It's very difficult to do, but I'm always a big fan of like looking at those and seeing how useful they are and seeing if people like them. So continuing the discussion, because we're only at, we're at 50 minutes, which is almost an hour. Go Burns gave me a bunch of shit because I said Karak rambles for an hour, and he was like, it's like 40 minutes. Where's my... Yeah, I know you're watching, bastard. So I'll continue talking until I get to the end. One of the things I do have to say I'm super excited for is the Duke. The big Xbox original controller has been authorized to be re-released for the Xbox One and Xbox One X. I'm stoked for that, and I know a lot of people hate it. I mean, this controller's like this fucking big. No lie, if you go look at the Duke, that's what it was called, the Duke. Not internally. People called it that because it was like an American, you know, controller. It was like everybody else's little hands, and then the Americans are like, hang on, I just got done eating my fucking pork rind nachos. Let's play some Xbox with the buttons this big and shit. So that is going to be at some point allowed to be created and be sold and work with the Xbox One S and normal and X. I'm excited for that. I love it. I'm a big fan of the larger controllers. I always have been. And all my friends would come over. Well, there was one or two friends who liked it, but most hated it. Be like, this controller's massive. And I'd be like, I know, man. It feels like a steering wheel, but it's a controller. It wasn't that big. It was pretty damn huge. And I've always been such a big fan of that controller. I'm very stoked to see that. Some people ask me how often I upgrade my PC. It's actually a really good question. Normally what I try to do is I don't really try to upgrade it unless I know something's going wrong, whether it be, you know, a new benchmark suite shows that you're missing some power somewhere because some new things will happen in a game, what have you. It's really difficult to know when you need to upgrade because a lot of people don't realize that every engine can stress a different part. GPU, CPU combined, DRAM. We actually, there's a game coming out. I wonder if I'm under NDA for this. There's a game coming out, I'm not going to say which has proven that the RAM speed is, of all things, which isn't as often as you would expect, is actually mattering for how it's running more than other games. And so you have these different elements. It's very difficult sometimes to know when you should upgrade, but I like to be, you know, in the fairly, if I'm reviewing PC games, it makes sense to be a spread across. And so I have different CPUs and GPUs for over the years, and I've upgraded them slowly so that I always have sort of a low end, like my 970 or my 920 i7 ancient. I mean, that's an ancient CPU, but it overclocks to 4.2, and I think in that I have a 960. And you know, have these ability to sort of move these items around as I get new stuff and be able to test for people on various different difficulties, because to me, I think that's pretty important. Sorry, not difficulties, but power systems and power supplies and just overall GPU and CPU power. Because, you know, I'll say 1080 a lot of times in reviews. Some people get mad. I'll be like, well, you know, 1080 is still a generally high end. And I say that I usually try to say if you're trying to get 60 but you have a lower, you know, GPU, you may have to do this, blah, blah. I try to put it in there, but it is difficult. So I don't really have a specific speed or time or whatever that I do upgrades. But if I notice something's really failing, then it's pretty much time, and I'll usually try to do as good of an upgrade as I can personally afford. And then a lot of people are asking me, do I still play the PS4 original because I have the Pro? Yeah, I absolutely do. It's absolutely needed because I'll be reviewing a game, and sometimes it's not just resolution, man. It's just like the Xbox original and the Xbox One S. Not all the time, but occasionally the S will get just enough frames per second more that it makes the game solid. So let's say you get a game like and this is not a good example of this. I'm just going to talk about a game I know doesn't get the best frame rate originally. Dragon's, well, it's not even, yeah, so let's say it's a Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma sometimes would get down to like 27 frames per second or something crazy like that. If you add 3 to it because of the Xbox One S, then suddenly it's locked at 30 and it's going to feel smoother, not super smooth, but it's going to feel smoother than if it's chugging between, 25 and 30 and so forth. And so I really like to have those different options and test them and test to see, HDR, is HDR working on multiple ones? Because we've had a couple instances where HDR doesn't necessarily work as well on the one console as it does on the other. So yeah, I definitely enjoy having that original. I haven't sold it or anything like that. I'm like, I'll keep a hold of it, especially because it's nice to see the difference. Is it resolution? Is it frame rate between these systems? And how much of a difference it really is. Because sometimes you will get that where somebody will say, oh, it's at this resolution, but they don't really mention that, let's say the frame rate's worse or something like that. And sometimes you'd be, oh, you know what? I'll be okay. The frame rate's too variable here. I'd be okay losing some of that resolution if the frame rate was tighter. And this is a decision that a lot of people make. Even game developers are understanding it's being made by changing that in their game options, where they say, like cinematic mode or action mode, stuff like that. So very crazy stuff. I think it's really cool. And then I guess last is people always ask me about the art. How do I choose it? I don't necessarily choose it. I just, if it looks cool, well, there you go. Yeah, if it looks cool, I get it. The Reaper poster I just found online. Somebody was selling them online. And I was like, man, that shit's amazing. Shonuff, the Shogun of Harlem from the Last Dragon, which is one of my favorite B movies, was also pretty random. I just found it online and I was like, man, I really, really like this. And I love that actor. Barry Gordy was the director. I can't remember the actor's name, but I loved him in it. I thought he did such a great enough Shogun. He was awesome, man. He was such a great character. Vision is cool because this is going to sound weird, but I'm not a big fan of green, and it offsets the others pretty well, which I really like. And I liked that rougher look in the art when I saw it. I was like, yeah, I got to have that. So that's pretty much how it happens, man. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, I got some art and I put it up there. Lastly, some people have asked me, why I choose versus other people, like sometimes won't show their face or something on YouTube, and how I handle privacy. That's really up to every individual person who has a YouTube channel. So I don't want to say that they shouldn't or should. I think for me, it's just like, here I am. I don't really give a shit, so I just do it. I think some people, it allows a degree of a degree of being anonymous, but also sort of a degree of separation. And if they need that to do whatever they want to do, I don't necessarily see an issue with it. I know some people use it as a crutch. I get that, whatever. But overall, I'm just like, hey, this is me and this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to put it out there, and people will be able to see me. It's also cool when you go to an event or something, you get to meet fans because they actually know who you are. So that's fun too. But, well, that's it for me. I think that's been almost an hour of me yakking in yo's ears. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs up. Just kidding. Thumbs down. It's fine. I won't hate you. I might cry a little bit, but I won't hate you. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.